Tell us how you got into the fire service. I know you and I spoke when we were up in Ohio together, and I kind of heard the backstory a little bit, but it's kind of unexpected. So, as you mentioned, you were a paralegal, right?
I was, yeah. So I got my start. I'm from Pittsburgh originally. I grew up here. I have two brothers, two younger brothers. One of them works for a fracking company. He does oil and drilling. He was in Texas for a long time. He's back here in Pittsburgh. He's working up north in the Pennsylvania area. He lives in Pittsburgh again. But we were always very close. So we're close in age too. We're each 2 years apart. So my middle brother's 2 years and then 2 years younger than him. So we're best friends too. So we always support each other. And how I fell into that was I was a paralegal first. I'd gone to school at the University of Pittsburgh. I went to Point Park. I got a degree in political science. I like history too, so always interested in the law. So I got a associate's degree in paralegal studies. Wanted to get into the law. Wanted my goal was to go to law school. So the path was it started to become very expensive with the school loans and things like that. So I got a job with Housing Authority for the city of Pittsburgh, and I worked in the ADA department. I did disability accommodations, and I also worked part time in their procurement. So I was kind of split with my paralegal duties. I would do procurement contracts just for general contracting, oversee them. I would submit them to general counsel saying if they were approved or not, and things like that. And then the other half of my day, I would go into the ADA department and I would do reasonable accommodations. I would help people get shower bars or ramps installed in their apartments or whatever they needed. They would submit requests. I'd research them, make sure that they were in the guidelines of what housing could do, and then we would get them funding to get it done. So I got to see a lot of results for the work I did, and I really enjoyed the ADA stuff, the disability stuff, helping people. So I was doing that. I was good, and they had a nice program with the city of Pittsburgh and housing that I could go to law school and they would help me pay for it. And it was a percentage based on my grades. And I always did well with testing in school. So I knew I could do pretty well and save a lot of money. The deal was that you had to work for housing as general counsel for a couple of years after you graduated, which was fine with me as a young lawyer. I think it started at like 70 or 80,000. That's not too bad for a brand new lawyer. So this was my path. This is what I wanted to do. I was happy doing. I enjoyed my job. My brother had just finished law school, hadn't got into the oil stuff yet, didn't know what he was going to do. My middle brother, and he just got home from college and he was trying to figure it out. So my mom told him about the civil service test for the fire department. I was working downtown. She asked me to go with him just to support him. So I signed up too, and I took the test with him. And they ended up calling me. I did pretty well on that test too. So I got the call. My brother didn't, and I told him I wasn't going to take it because I just took it just to support
Right.
him. I was just there as family support, and he was like, "Nah, this is the best job in the world." I didn't know anything about it. He's like, "I'm telling you, you'll do well. It's something different every day. You got to give it a shot." So I gave it a shot. I applied. I finished the process. I went to the academy. I ended up graduating first out of my academy. I got to pick my engine house. I did very well there, and I just clicked for me. The structure of the fire service and the brotherhood. I never had anything like that other than with my brothers. I never really had like people that like looked out for me and cared about me on and off the job. So this new family of that I was finally integrating into after the academy, it just really struck me. And I was lucky that my first lieutenant was Timmy Leach. He was a union guy. He's now our vice president. And I asked him, I said, I want to give back. I love this stuff. I was a rookie. How can I get involved? And he said, just come to the meetings. When we need help with events, just say yes. So I just started saying yes. I showed up for everything, became a part of everything. And that's how I got involved on the union side too, is I just wanted to thank these guys for everything they did at Local One as a rookie and getting me this job. And it just started to go from there. And then on the fire side, the lieutenant test came up. I promoted pretty early in my career. After 4.5, 5 years, I was a lieutenant. I was the first out of the class to promote on that side too. So I just really dove into the job 100%. And now I was a trustee for a couple years. My last term, I'm the recording secretary now, and I just continue to grow with the union and with the job. And I've never looked back. My family's super happy. My brother did find his place. He's a supervisor on a line in the union in the oil stuff. He loves it.
It's cool.
He's well respected on that side. It was his thing. He always wanted to work with his hands, so it was a big thing for him. And he took the test a couple more times. It just didn't pan out. He loves firemen. We take him everywhere with us because he's one of the guys. But super happy for him. I'm glad he encouraged me to do this. I probably would have been okay as a lawyer too, but there's nothing like being a firefighter. So
Nothing like it.
I always I always look back at that time when I just sat for the test to help him out, and I'm glad I took it serious. And I'm just competitive by nature. I wanted to see what the test was, and I wanted to do well on it, and it ended up giving me my pathway to my whole life. It gave me everything I
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, that's cool. So your involvement in the union, I mean, we're fast forwarding a little bit, but for the, I mean, I'm sure everybody listening is listening for this reason is, Pittsburgh Local 1, it was the first fire department in the country to get medical marijuana in their policy, and I've always been curious, and I know my listeners are too. How did that start? Where did you guys find the need for it? And because man, you know better than I do. You've presented around the country, and I'm sure you field phone calls all the time, but guys don't know how to go from 0 to 1. Like everybody wants the
Right.
policy. Everybody's like, well, we know we need it, and I'm sure they have some policymakers that'll probably agree with them. But it's like, how did that even come around, and what did that look like?
So, and you're right. It's a hard first step to take, and it's getting easier and easier out there. We get a lot of feedback from the locals we've helped and the presentations I've given. That I'm seeing other legislation and other MOUs and other contracts now that it's getting easier. They are getting assistance from the other side, but sometimes they don't too. I mean, it's a fight both ways. Like I mentioned, my buddy Chuck from down in the French Quarter, he's working on legislation down there. He's working on a contract down there, but without a CBA, it's very tough for him to convince them of something like this, even on a medical side. So
Right.
how it happened here was a lot. It was a lot of hard work, but it was also just being at the right time at the right place too. So back in 16, Pennsylvania, they had their medical marijuana law. They legalized medical marijuana in Pennsylvania, and the mayor at the time in Pittsburgh had said that he supported the initiative and that he was okay with. He hoped that his employees would use this as a medication too or consider it, and that he would be supportive of that. And our leadership at the time at Local One, they noticed it, they saw it, but there wasn't a lot of interest in it because we're a random drug testing contract. We're underneath that, and not a lot of people were well versed in this, but we have a lot of veterans. We're veteran heavy, like most firefighter unions. We have a lot of veterans, and how it came to pass was one of our trustees, retired Marine, great guy, great union worker. He was going to see his doctor at the VA, and the VA had recommended, like, hey, I know you're not into taking all these different medications. Have you ever considered medical marijuana now that the state legalized? And he said, I've considered it, but I work for a job where we get random drug testing. It's not federally legal. I can't do it. You know what I mean? So the doctor told him, if it ever changes, consider this pathway, look into it. I think it would be beneficial for you. So he brought it to the union and he said, hey, my doctors are telling me this, like, where are we at with this? And they began to research it. I wasn't on the board at the time, but they knew I was good at research and I was very involved with the committees and things like that. And they asked me to start researching, like, how this is beneficial for PTSD and things like that, and give them the more of the scientific side that I always talk about. And the board at the time started doing the research legally, and what had happened was they came to the city and they said, hey, when you say you're okay with employees, do you mean all employees or do you just mean certain ones? And they said, present it to us, talk to us about it. Let's sit down and have a talk. And they did. And the mayor and the administration, they didn't have an issue with it. They said, let's do an MOU. We'll put it together and we'll work this out. So in 2018, we established the MOU with the city that allowed our firefighters active duty to utilize medical marijuana under the guidelines of the state. They have the proper see the doctor, get the card, everything. It has to be followed. We're still underneath a random drug testing policy, so that comes into play as well. We can talk about that as well. And we got the MOU done. We rolled it out. We explained to our membership, like, we're not doctors. We're not trying to encourage this. We're not putting out there. This is just a tool in the toolbox that the city's allowing us to use. We recommend you talk to your doctor about it if it's something you consider before you take it any further. But it was a big day. It was a huge thing for us. We weren't sure how much involvement we would get from our memberships, if anybody was into it or not. But it started off, it rolled out a little slow, but it's been nothing but positive since then. Like I said, we've had the MOU since 2018, and it's been going very well here. We're seeing a lot of progress in the city of Pittsburgh too. Recently, a city councilwoman has put up a resolution to have medical marijuana card holders in the city of Pittsburgh part of a protected class now, that they can't be intimidated or discriminated against in hiring policies or work or anything, like to add that as a protected class, which won't necessarily affect us one way or another because of our MOU and our contract. But it's good to see that progress, and we support things like that because it just shows that government is starting to recognize it as a medicine too, and that's what we need. That's what I always preach. It has to be viewed as a medicine before we can ever take this step to take it seriously on all levels. And we see that slow moving ball towards it being viewed as strictly a medical tool to be used, and that was a positive thing. But yeah, so the MOU in 18 was the big step, and ever since then, we've just been spreading the good word. I continue to do the research. We touch base with our lawyers. We keep our board up to date on what's going on nationally and what's going on with the scheduling of THC and marijuana and nationally and things like that, because that all affects us. I mean, we're surrounded by recreational states too. So, we always want to educate our membership on the differences and what they have to be careful with and things like that, because, the lines get blurred sometimes in the recreational states as far as what's medical, what's not, what levels are safe and things like that. So we always try to help out and guide our guys towards the information that's going to keep them safe and keep them on the right track with their job and with their doctors and things like that, because as well as I do, there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of bad information out there about what's good and what isn't, what works, what doesn't. Even with the CBD, you have to be very careful where you get your CBD sources from. You have to make sure they're pure. It's a good source, because there's just businesses pop up all over the internet, and you never know what you're really getting into, and you really have to protect yourself and your members.
Yeah. So the craziest thing to me is that this was an MOU and it wasn't negotiated as a part of your contract. So I think a lot of people around the country immediately think this has to be something that's in the contract, that are union members, and most most large cities, I think, career are union, but there's a lot that aren't. I don't know if that makes it easier or harder. So let's just talk on the union side for a second. Do you think it's easier? I mean, obviously it's easier to get an MOU, but for a lot of guys and girls out there listening, I think what they just heard was you got to have the right people in City Hall first, because you guys didn't have to go in and have this fight where you were trying to talk them into it. They were already open-minded to it. So I guess you can talk about an MOU if you have the right people, or if you don't have the right people, is trying to negotiate in the contract a better idea?
So I think that's a matter of just timing. We see it a lot in the contract. If your contract's coming up, it's a good thing to have too. I would always say start with your state legislation, see what the program is, see what medical marijuana is in your state. Do your research, tap people like me, call me, we'll have a conversation. I have a good team on the legal side and the scientific side of this, but you need to know what you're dealing with first before you ask to be a part of it. So make sure that, are there any disqualifiers already in the legislation? Like some are written the way that exclude firefighters or safety. You'll see safety sensitive language a lot, and things like that. These are pointed at us. These are guided towards keeping us and police and public safety out sometimes, and that's intentional. And so you have to find the things, and you have to be prepared before you go to legislators and city council and the mayor. You have to be prepared to answer the questions they're going to ask. So these questions are going to ask, especially like on duty use, drug testing, vehicle accidents, things like that. You have to do that research and have these answers before. That was a thing they taught day one in law school. Never ask a question you don't know the answer to. Have these answers before they ask those questions, and do your research. Be a subject matter expert on this before you take it there. Whether you're going an MOU route or a contract, I mean, we'd like to see it memorialized too. But however you do it, you need to know who your allies are and who aren't, but you need to be prepared to sit down and have a full conversation with it. You can't just say, we want medical marijuana, we think it'll help. Well, why would it help? And what are we going to do if this happens? I have these conversations with Chuck down in French Quarter. that he's been talking about. I said, prepare yourself. Like, look at your legislation, know the drawbacks, know what you want to see change, and how can we get past it. And there's other ways, like we see IAFF, like the New York guys, they just removed THC from the panel. There's different ways to attack it. If there's hurdles, there's ways around those hurdles. You just have to really do some planning, do some research, and then go from there. But as far as MOU, the contract, yeah, you always want to see it in the contract. You know what I mean? It's always, but we weren't concerned with the MOU because it was pretty squared away. We knew we weren't going to get any pushback as long as there was. Most of the agreement was based on as long as no federal grant money was taken away due to federal legislation on medical marijuana laws in general, we would be okay. And they wanted to see how it worked out too. And we've been blessed to have a successful program with minimal issues. A couple speed bumps with reporting from the random drug tests and things like that, but nothing that was caused disciplinary action or anything like that. Just clerical issues and recording issues that we had between the third party drug testing and things like that. But we squashed that pretty quick. But it's all about knowing what you're talking about and knowing what you're asking for. Especially one thing I always tell them is to really hyper focus on the medical marijuana side of it. Don't worry so much about recreational things like that, because if you're selling a recreational ask to your leadership, or even your chiefs aren't going to be super comfortable with this at first, and then your bureau, and you got to go all the way up the steps. You have to have allies when you do this, and a big thing for us too was that the veterans on our job, like that we brought this to them with our veterans. Like I said, with the first guy that brought this to us, we brought it and said, hey, this is a retired combat Marine that is a great fireman. He has a great reputation. And he's asking for help, and his doctor told him this is where the help is at. How do we get him that help? And that's where we build our plea off of, is that, we're not looking for an outlet or an excuse to use marijuana. We're looking for a partnership to look into another medicine that may help out and keep guys off of alcohol, keep them off opiates, do all these things that we're being told. Is we're not experts either. We're doing our research at the same time they are. And then we came back to the table, we posed the issue, and they were, like you said, it is a matter of circumstance too, with having those receptive politicians, having a mayor that wants to listen to you, having a bureau chief that will support these kind of things. And we had all those pieces in place at the right time, which was absolutely beneficial. But even if you have opposition sometimes, even right now, you still prepare the case, you still prepare the package, you get ready, because these things are changing. We see it on the federal level and on the state levels of medical marijuana research coming into play. All these laws changing. The White House talking about rescheduling THC and all these things. Like, so you always want to be prepared if things change to reapproach too. Like, if you get a no now, it might not be a no forever. And there are other avenues to take. Like I said, you can change the drug panels, like the New York guys did, or you can start with educating your guys about CBD and other treatments way, and say, hey, we got to avoid this for now, but once we have this conversation with this legislator, or once they change this in Congress, we may be able to take that other step. It's not always a right away yes or no thing. You just have to be prepared to have that conversation with anybody that wants to have it. You may get a phone call like, hey, I want to talk about getting your guys medical marijuana. Where are you guys out with it? You always want to have that prepared and ready to go, and not put to the side as just the first no you get. Absolutely, always speak with your attorneys, your union's attorneys, to make sure to weigh those risks, to say, hey, we realize this is a gray area. This is somewhere that we might have to tread lightly, or maybe it's not worth the risk. But we felt that our MOU was strong enough that it protected us. It had that back door out if this did become an issue. So we took that step, and we just, we thought the juice was worth the squeeze. We thought it was worth rolling out this program and seeing where it took us. Like you said, we were the first to do it. There wasn't a lot to go on at that point. We were kind of in uncharted territory, and we've been going strong since 2018 without any talk with the city or any kind of government about federal grant loss or anything being taken away from our bureau or our departments as a public safety whole. So I would always, like I said, it's all about research and knowing what you're dealing with in your state, what your state laws are, how your state interacts with the federal government, what kind of grants you're getting. Other bureaus, other public safety departments, they may be getting grants that we're not involved with. These grants themselves might be sensitive to this type of legislation, to this type of MOU. They might specifically, say that any kind of medical marijuana thing would violate that. You have to be aware of what your city's involved with as far as what money you're taking too. So
Yeah,
everybody's
I
different,
think.
but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think the MOU, that's something, knowing that that's what you guys did, going to them saying this thing is null if it violates federal law,
Right.
and that's like a really good thing to put in your back pocket to come to the city with, and or your administrators, and say, hey, look, if you're worried about it, let's put this in writing, because it's an act of good faith, but also Pittsburgh's doing it and they haven't had an issue. Other departments are doing it and they haven't had an issue. So it's really
It also
interesting. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. It also gives them a way out. If the
Yeah.
government, if the Fed comes to them and says, "Hey, you guys are violating law. We're pulling these grants," they can say, "Wait a second. We do have this agreement, but we also have Section 4 that says we were unaware we were in violation. We will stop this today and move forward." So they can
Right.
protect that in case they miss something too. So we gave them that opportunity to protect. And again, we don't want to lose any funding either. Like we're right on board with them. This is not intended to step over rules or circumvent laws. This was a medication we were looking to help our membership out with. So if at any point this would jeopardize anything for the city, for our bureau, for other bureaus, we would step back too, and we would figure out another way. But we were totally comfortable with it. And when the city saw that, I think just like you said, they realized that that was for them to protect what they're doing in other avenues as far as funding and grants and things like that. So you
Yeah.
always want to be aware of it's constantly changing. Like I said, a year from now we may not even have to have this conversation about MOUs and having a way out, because if it goes to Schedule 3 like we think it will, and it becomes a federally recognized prescription drug that can be researched and prescribed, then we don't have a problem here anymore. It's just another prescription drug that somebody can get a prescription from their actual PCP, and they can begin treatment under their own doctor instead of having to go to a specialist, and jump through all
Yep.
these hoops, which would be great. But we started this, like I said, in 2016. When it started to roll out 2018, we got the MOU. We'd still be waiting now if we didn't take action for the federal government to change the schedule. And they've been talking about changing Schedule 1 to 3 for THC and marijuana since
Forever.
like the 90s. Yeah, maybe even before. That's when I first picked up. So we decided not to wait. We thought the wording that we put together in the MOU with the city protected all parties involved. And that's a big thing too. Anytime I present to another local, I bring the MOU just to show them that we do have that, and there's a reason for that. That wasn't forced upon us. That was an agreement that we put in to protect all parties and all grants and all funding. We don't want to be successful here at the cost of everything we worked for here for specific grants or any kind of funding for our public safety.
Yeah. That's probably one of the biggest concerns, and the misconception as well. We've talked about it many times. The Drug Free Workplace Act. Just summarizing it, and this is articles that have been written by other lawyers, not me, because I'm, again, my disclaimer too, not a lawyer. This isn't legal advice, but
Right.
uh, the Drug Free Workplace Act is for drugs in the workplace, not at
Right.
home. So they can't say you're not allowed to drink alcohol. So you're not allowed to drink alcohol at work. Not allowed to be drunk at work.
Of course.
Can't be intoxicated at work. So the federal side of it is very interesting. So that brings that wraps up the first thing I wanted to bring up. But the second one was, you talked about random drug testing. So you guys still have random drug testing. You still test for THC.
Correct.
So how does that work? Like, they call the third party, and then they basically have a list of who has a medical marijuana card, and that's it.
So that's part of the MOU too. So that was another hurdle we had to figure out, like, how are we going to do this? Because we're not asking like the path New York took after us. We weren't prepared to ask to remove THC because we were aware of black market THC use, marijuana on the streets. That
Mm-hmm.
was a concern of theirs, that people are getting it off the streets. We have a concern with that too because it's not a pure product. And also we wanted to make sure that that our guys were being safe whenever they were using this medical, that they knew what they were getting into, they knew what they were putting into their body and things like that. So when we started to talk about the drug testing aspect, we said, well, how can we do this? And so what the MOU basically says is that when you register, when you talk to your doctor, you go through the steps with the state and you register and you get your card. You take it down to, we have a third party that does our random drug testing. Mercy Hospital here in Pittsburgh. They do them for us. And so when you go in when you first get your car, you turn it in, and they make a copy, and it's just put in your file. That, it's a medical facility. This is not held by the city. The city does not hold a list of public safety members that have medical marijuana cards. The mayor has no idea. The bureau chiefs. This is protected by HIPAA. This is just another prescription. So the only people that know are your doctor, your prescribing doctor, Mercy Hospital, and you. So you go down. It's not a big announcement. When you're filling out your thing, you hand them the card. They make a copy. You have to renew every year, so you do have to keep it update with them as well, because you'll get a conflict there with an expired card. The expired card is the same as not having a card, so you do have to keep up on your yearly updates. And we're hoping when the scheduling changes, that's a little different too, because that's the only prescription that you have to constantly continually turn in, which is kind of crazy. But it's just, we're going along to get along. We're not trying to make waves, so we're trying to work with the city however they want. So what it says is that you will do that. So we get random, so it's random throughout the city. A chief will be notified in the morning that this company has to be at the drug testing site by this time. He'll notify. So if I get the call, my crew has to go down, I'll go down, and my card's already on file, so I don't have to say anything. I just fill out the normal paperwork. I take my urinalysis, and what will happen is, more times than not, I'll go back to work, because remember, this isn't a reasonable suspicion. This is a random drug test, so we're not disciplined. We're not put off the job until pending or anything like that. This isn't reasonable. So we go back to work. A couple days later, I'll get a call from the MRO, from the doc, and they'll say, hey, Lieutenant O'Leary, you tested positive for THC in your urinalysis. I see you have a card on file. Can you tell me where you fill your prescription? What dispensary do you use in the city? So they want to verify. So the problem they run into, and they weren't aware of this until we rolled the program, is that they attempted to call these dispensaries and say, hey, does Sean O'Leary go to you for, and they won't answer the question. Right. They are so worried about HIPAA themselves that they won't even acknowledge I was ever there, that I'm a card holder. That they just won't do it. They won't answer those questions, regardless if it's the city. I could give them permission, they won't do it. They've told us that it's not going to happen. So they had that issue, is they can't verify. So what they're doing is they'll call and they'll say, I see you have the card. What dispensary? And I'll tell them, and they say, can you send us a receipt? So what happens is, I'll take a screenshot of my receipt, and I'll either email or text it to the doctor. They'll send me their email in a private email to my city email. I'll send them a picture of a current receipt, and it just says that, it has my name on the receipt, my medical marijuana ID, and then the purchase point of where I purchased it from. And that's enough. That constitutes as a prescription to them. So what we didn't know is, as far as like DOT standards were, that when we always thought, we really didn't think much about how it occurred. Like if I would go down and I actually just had a bone graft on my jaw. I had oral surgery, and they gave me Tylenol with codeine. So if I go down there and I give a urinalysis and it's positive for Tylenol with codeine, they call and say, hey, Sean, you're positive for opiates. Do you have a prescription? I say yes. I send them the picture of that. They will actually call the pharmacy and verify that I filled the prescription at this pharmacy with this doctor at this time. Since they had no way of doing that, this was their way of figuring out a way just to verify, because they're worried about street purchases and even recreational stuff, because you know as well as I do, the dosing on those are just sometimes really, really outrageous and not at a medical level. So they just wanted to make sure that everything in the guidelines of the medical marijuana initiative in Pennsylvania was being adhered to. So that's their way of verifying, and we were fine with that. Like I said, it took some time to explain to the membership how the best way to do it, as far as getting their cards on file. They were concerned about privacy with that, like anybody. So we explained to them that they're protected by privacy, by HIPAA and all that this will not be shared with the city. There's no running list of who's on it and who isn't, or anything like that. No targeting would occur as far as random because of this or anything like that. And we've been very successful. We've had a good path towards this, and we let our guys know that, if you're going to use this medication, you really have to keep up on your card and things like that, because it is still on the drug panel. If you do not have a medical marijuana card, that is the same as not having a prescription for a narcotic that's on the panel as well. And you run the risk of violating the drug policy. So always keep up on your prescription, keep up on your card with your doctor, and you'll be fine. You'll have nothing to worry about. If your analysis is positive and your card's on file and it's active, the MRO will call the city and report a negative drug test for that member. There will be no further questions from the city, from the doctor, anything else. This will be reported as negative. It won't be that there was THC in your urine, but you had a medical card. This will be reported as a negative drug test, and you are back to work as on your next shift without any issues.
So how does it work with enforcing intoxication at work then?
So intoxication at work, it goes along the same lines as everything else. Like you said, with alcohol, with any other drugs, we don't encourage our members to be intoxicated on anything, even a prescription drug they may have. We don't want anybody to be under the influence of anything on the job. So, it's always just been, we have a reasonable suspicion clause in our contract for officers to enforce, our chiefs and our supervising officers. We depend on them to identify these issues in their engine houses and to act accordingly. It's been successful prior to medical marijuana. Medical marijuana is just another prescribed drug that is on the list now, but it doesn't change the way we evaluate our members. We evaluate our firefighters and our officers to be ready for work, and we're professional firefighters. We hold ourselves to that standards. I'm not going to allow anybody to ride on my rig that's intoxicated. Like you said, I'm not going to let anybody have a beer and ride on my rig. I'm not going to let them be high and be on my rig. And as an officer and as my supervising officers above me depend on me to identify those things as well. So, we depend on training and things like that to identify it. But as well as I do in the field, I mean, we come across intoxicated people and people on high on drugs and alcohol. We know what we're looking at, and the past 6 years, we have had no disciplinary actions, no accusations of on the job use, no problems with vehicle accidents where anybody was accused of a reasonable suspicion or anything like that. We've held that standard. We communicate all the time to our members how delicate this agreement is and what a gift it is to have this medication in our toolbox, and that one bad step could lose it for everybody. So our members are very careful with this. They treat it like a medicine. They treat it with respect. And like I said, we realize that we're the first ones to do this, but we're Pittsburgh firefighter. We're local number one. We hold ourselves to that standard that we're not going to come in intoxicated. We're not going to abuse the system or try to take advantage of it. And like I said, I don't move medical marijuana over to a separate podium. I don't want you intoxicated on anything. Don't show up to my engine house high on anything. Be ready to work. And we all hold ourselves to that standards, and we've been successful to this point, and hopefully in the future as well, we won't have any issues with it. But yeah, that is just a professional part of our contract that says, if an officer has a reasonable suspicion, he can notify the BC on duty, and they'll go from there to pull him out and have him tested and go from there as far as what the contract states. But we've had no reason to assume that anybody has violated those rules up to this point with our MOU with medical marijuana. So hopefully we keep going on that professional standard, and just hold ourselves to a higher. I mean, we hold ourselves to a higher standard than anything in a contract ever will. So, the brothers and sisters, the local one and the IAFF, I think we all hold each other. Nobody wants that black eye on the local or on the bureau or on the fire service that, we took this opportunity to help people and we abused it and we lost it. I mean, that would just be a terrible thing. And who would want to be that one guy or one female that caused that? That would be awful. You'd have a lot of angry firemen over here in Pittsburgh if you were the reason that MOU got pulled because the city can't trust us to use our medication at home properly. So
yeah, but also, man, the rest of the country too. They look to you guys for this. You guys went through all the hurdles, all the headaches. You have the policy in place. Man. And I remember I asked you this before we met face to face in New York when we went to Redmond in New York City, and I was like, "Hey, what is the data you guys have for discipline and everything else?" And because I know every department in the country, their administrative staff, you had mentioned earlier, don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. I know if I go into my administration and pitch this, they're going to say, what will happen to workman's comp, what will happen to accidents, what will happen to discipline, and you guys have this awesome amount of proof that this does not make it worse. Arguably better, but when if you did have someone who you had to flag for suspicion of being intoxicated at work, what is the testing process? I know a lot of our listeners are probably pretty educated on testing just because of how many times I've talked about it, but basically marijuana stays in your system, in your urine, for a long time.
It does.
The metabolites of THC, I should say, let's get specific here.
Sure.
The metabolites of THC stay in your urine for a long time, weeks. But that doesn't mean you're high.
Right.
So, with alcohol, you blow a breathalyzer and it'll tell you whether you have alcohol in your blood or not. And with THC, it's a little trickier because it just hangs around the metabolites. So what do you guys do for testing that's different?
Right. So you're right. And I educate my members on that as well, that there is a difference between active THC and inactive THC in your bloodstream. And inactive pops the same on a urinalysis as active. And so it is very tough. And I think that the burden of proof is really not in our favor on that. If somebody would get pulled down for a reasonable suspicion of pop, there would be a lot of issues there. We would have to really identify our case and make an argument that he wasn't using on a job. But if there was evidence he was, we would have to go from there. But right now, federally, in any state, there's no measure yet. Like you said, there's a line of alcohol that you blow into a breathalyzer here in the PA, 0.08 or above, you're intoxicated. That's a level. As far as the job goes, you can't have 0.0 anything, or you're not supposed to have any alcohol in your system. So there's a measurable line regardless of where you make that line at. With active THC, we're seeing a lot of technology. Carnegie Mellon here in Pittsburgh is developing a breath test and a saliva test, things like that. The technology is coming. The FDA hasn't approved anything. We encourage that, and we always say this at conventions and when we have these calls. We encourage that on-site standard of testing, and to set a standard federally, set a standard of active THC. We are seeing other locals take this step. I think it was New Mexico. I'd have to check. I have so many MOUs and contracts from other locals. They always send me, which I appreciate. I have one from Alaska. I have them from all over. And that just shows like how thankful they are, their local one, to take this step. That guys just send me their email like, hey, we got it in our contract. We got an MOU. Here's what we got. And sometimes they're more useful to the member than ours. Like ours was the first. Ours was the declaration, you know what I mean? But everybody else is growing and they're finding the loopholes, or they're finding things that work for them better. So I see even Allentown, PA, they have it in their contract. They have a great breakdown of how everything works. Like our MOU from 2018 has grown into all these other directions and protected members even better. That I look at theirs of things that I can add to mine next time we open up and next time we put changes in too. But we encourage them to establish that active THC standard and then to begin the testing, because we want to be safe too. But without that standard, all that is, it's a gray area that hurts us. It puts our members at risk, because like you said, like THC can remain in your system from 20 days to 60 days. If you're a 65-year-old guy with a little bit of belly fat, it might be in there for 4 months. I mean, depending on how much you sweat out, depending on how much everybody's body's different. Everybody metabolizes THC separately. So there's the burden of proof then moves over to us to show them that we hadn't used that day. And that's a scary situation to be in. And that's why we tell our guys to never put themselves in that position, never come in, anywhere within that window. The standard kind of is any 6 hours or longer, between use. So, but again, like these can all be argued by different scientists, different experts. I read things all the time that give you different numbers. Like I said, I was getting on New Mexico, had set a standard with them of the active THC metabolite. And we encourage everybody to do what works for them. And maybe they needed to do that with their legislators to get the medical marijuana over that hump. Maybe that's what they wanted to see. But without a federal standard, setting your own standard, we worry about that not being the perfect number, not being a standard that necessarily, like you said, is actually the intoxication point. Like, we don't know where that is. We're not scientists any more than we are lawyers. Where's the intoxication point? Tell us that, then give us the tools to test for that. And we'll be glad to hold our members to that same standard too, and make sure that nobody's ever intoxicated on the job. But we're waiting for science to catch up. We're waiting for the legal side of everything to catch up and give us those things. Like you said before, like we can breathalyze anybody at any point and see where they're at. We don't have that ability yet. They're there. The tests exist for saliva and breath right now, but they're not FDA approved. They're not being endorsed by anybody yet that we can bring that to an actual standard to put in a contract or have with the city to test on duty. So we just rely on the identification of the officer, and we haven't had to thankfully go down that road of somebody being accused having THC in their system and fighting that battle. That's kind of a bridge that we have to cross when we get to. Hopefully we never do. Hopefully the science gives us those tests. Hopefully the scheduling changes and we don't have to worry about these things on the job as much as far as what the level is and not knowing what the level is on any given day. So it's one of those gray areas, John, where we know it's there. We do have to deal with it. We have to find a standard, but it's not set in stone yet as far as what intoxication levels are. Like I said, we encourage 0 levels on the job, but like you said, there's no your analysis can't differentiate between active and non-active THC. So yeah, if you pull me out of work and take me down and say you have a reasonable suspicion, I'm going to still be positive regardless of if I used within a 10-hour period or a 10-day period. It's not going to make a difference at that point. With that level of sensitivity on the test, it's not going to tell you what my levels of inactive and active THC are. And we on our side, as the member and as the patients, we encourage that. We want that standard. We want those tests so that I can show you that. Test me whenever you want on the job. There's not going to be any active THC in my system at any point while I work. I have a right to medicate at home, off the job, like you said, to take care of myself and my health and wellness. But when I come to work, I'm there to work and I'm there fully focused. I would never want to be medicated at work. My focus, that's the amount of the amount of work we get put on us, the responsibilities, it would just be too much. And that's with anything. I mean, I don't want my guys on opiates. I don't want them on alcohol. I don't want them on Xanax. I don't want them on anything. We need to be fully focused for the mission. And so we always encourage that. And any tool that'll help prove to the city or to anybody that may question somebody on duty, we encourage that. I hope we get that sooner than later to have a tool to prove that if there's ever a question of an intoxication, that we can just have that test and look, there's 0 active THC in the bloodstream right now, in the urine stream, whatever, with saliva, wherever they take this to get it federally accepted. I think it would be great to have that as a tool for all of us.
Yeah, it's going to get there. It takes so much time. I've talked to people about the technology that are pretty sharp on it, guys at Johns Hopkins. And,
yeah, right. We had that conversation. The biggest holdup is the Schedule 1. If you make it Schedule 3, there will be a lot more universities that can test and do this research. There'll be more private companies. There's no encouragement for private companies to do the R&D on these things because it's a Schedule 1 drug. It's completely illegal. You make it a prescription drug, you make it Schedule 3, you give them the tools to test, we're going to get a lot more products in the testing area and on the medication area. It'll open up a whole new avenue, and it'll make it safer for everybody on the job, off the job, the patients and the people we serve. All we need is that R&D, but there's no encouragement on the private side or the public side to do this until it's a legally viewed prescription drug by the federal government, and that's the biggest holdup.
That's it, man. Yeah, I think that a lot of departments, I speak for a lot of departments when I say thank you guys, all the guys and girls at Local 1 that had to put in the work to get this. I mean, you guys are trailblazers, and I mean, it's 2024 now, but people forget this has been going on with you guys for 6 years. So just thank you for everything. Thank you for the time that I know personally that you've put in for other departments and contracts, MOUs, answering questions. You've helped me out. You've helped my friends out. I know you've gone around on your own dime, like just talking around the country. I think like in the future, man, people are going to look back and they're going to see that you are among few people that really pushed this thing forward in the fire service and helped, union and non-union members just try to do right by their health and wellness. So history will look favorably upon you, brother, and thank you very much. Sean, thank you for joining us, man. And for those of you that for people that want to reach out to you, if there's anything that they want questions about or help with, how do they reach you?
Yeah, you can always reach me at my just at my local my union email address, or give me a call. Here's my put in the camera for
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
just
Nice.
shoot me an email or a phone call anytime, and I always respond. Like I said, I talk to people all over the country about this stuff, and I'm just here to help. This isn't anything that I ever set out to do or knew I'd be a part of. They tasked me with it, and it continued to grow. We did Alts, we did Cleveland together. We've been to Redmond. I mean, I met friends like you and people that care too. It's just a group of guys and women that want to help give these guys some relief in another path. So I'm honored to be a part of it. I'm honored that other experts like you give me a call just to hear my input. I said I'm not a lawyer or a doctor. I'm just a firefighter that did some research and cares about my members and the members nationwide. And I've seen the results here in Pittsburgh. It helps. Our DUIs are down, our disciplinary is down. I get people calling me all the time, telling me that it saved them from prescription drugs or depression, things like that. And I'm not diagnosing anybody. This is just the data I'm getting back from people. I know it's helped me. I had a lot of anxiety issues when I first started out, and it's just a helpful thing. And then I've had other people that have used the card for a year or so. It wasn't for them. Maybe they went strictly to CBD, or maybe they moved on to something else. But they gave it a try. They had the ability to try it, and that's the most important thing for me, is that they have the ability if they want it. If it's something their doctors want to do, it's there for them. And being a part of helping them get that as an option was a huge thing for me. So thank you very much, John. I appreciate you having me on here. I appreciate your friendship, brother. Anytime you need me, just give me a call. I'll be there.
Likewise, man. Yeah, anytime. Thank you. Thank you for being here, man. Take
Of
care.
course. All right, brother. Be safe.